A boy and a girl, twins. They were born to my husband and my absolute best friend. I signed the divorce papers in absolute silence. When he took her home to his family's historic estate in Newport to break the news to his mother, she reportedly froze the moment she laid eyes on the two infants. Just as I capped my pen after signing the final page of the divorce settlement, my phone lit up. It was a text message from Cameron. A single photo. In it, he and Chelsea were leaning against each other, beaming with joy, as they swaddled two newborns, one in baby blue, the other in blush pink. The background was the expansive, sun-drenched window of a VIP maternity suite. Beneath the photo was a short caption, "Healthy boy and girl twins. Chelsea and I have started our new chapter together. I hope you can move on with your life, too." I placed the phone face down on my desk. I did not cry. I did not ask why. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. I rubbed my eyes trying to summon regret, but there was only absolute clarity. This was not a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. I walked over to the massive glass whiteboard dominating my home office wall. Outside, the gray skyline of Boston's Seaport District reflected the cold reality of the past 5 years. This glass wall once held the product development pipelines I had drawn up to save his failing biotech startup. Today, it was densely covered in neon sticky notes, intersecting arrows, and alphanumeric codes spread across the glass like a complex financial mosaic. I had meticulously mapped out the multi-million-dollar fund flows of dozens of offshore shell companies and holding groups connected to next-gen innovations. This was my new battlefield. People expect a betrayed wife to weep, to shatter plates, to demand apologies. They assume the absence of tears means a lack of love. But my silence was not weakness. It was a hyper-rational trauma response. In the corporate world, when an asset becomes toxic and the risk index exceeds maximum allowable tolerance, you do not sit on the floor and mourn the capital. You execute an immediate stop-loss protocol. You liquidate your ties without emotion, cut your losses, and permanently sever the financial lifeline. My grief and rage were compressed into a tiny sealed compartment at the very bottom of my rational mind. Divorce was simply reclaiming my initial capital contribution. I picked up a red dry erase marker, my mind operating with the disciplined precision of a Swiss chronometer. Every single item was meticulously cataloged. I had pulled all-nighters for a week straight to organize it. This was not for property division. This was to permanently and completely sever all financial ties with Cameron. He probably assumed that once I signed the agreement his attorney drafted, I would simply fade away into the Boston fog as a pathetic woman, quietly discarded for his true love. He genuinely believed this was his orchestrated victory. He was entirely incorrect. I was not mourning a marriage. I was initiating a corporate liquidation. My phone buzzed again. An incoming call. The name Cameron flashed on the screen. I stared at it for 3 seconds, before sliding my finger across the glass just before it went to voicemail. I didn't say a word. From the other end of the line came Cameron's deliberately subdued yet unmistakably smug voice. "Did you see the picture?" He paused clearly, waiting for me to break down or react. When I maintained my silence, he continued in a boastful tone. "Chelsea and I had twins, a boy and a girl. Super healthy. It was a rough delivery for Chelsea, but it was all worth it. You really should be happy for us." Holding the bright red, dry erase marker in my hand, I traced the end of a dotted line representing a fund transfer on the bottom right corner of the whiteboard and drew a massive, forceful question mark. "Oh," I replied to the empty room in a completely flat voice. "Should I send a gift?" By your family's New England high society standards, I suppose I owe 2 gifts now. The other end of the line went dead silent. I could vividly picture Cameron's expression right then. His triumphant smirk frozen stiff on his face. He had placed this call specifically to hear me devastated, to hear me scream and hysterically interrogate him. My suffering was the necessary spice he needed to justify his betrayal, elevating his illicit affair into a grand, tragic romance. Instead, he got nothing but my tasteless acknowledgement and a mundane question about baby registry etiquette. After roughly 30 seconds, he finally spoke again. The artificial tenderness had vanished, replaced by the hypocritical, patronizing pity I had grown all too familiar with. "Savannah, please don't be like this," he sighed. "I know it hurts. There's no point in acting tough. What happened between us isn't entirely my fault. You were just too strong. You tried to execute everything like a corporate project. You are a cold-blooded corporate icebox. Our penthouse felt like a freezer. In 5 years, I never felt a shred of warmth. But Chelsea is different. She gives me a real home with warm home-cooked meals." I listened with absolute detachment, allowing his words to wash over me without leaving a mark. I knew the truth. What people often misunderstand about profound betrayal is that the betrayer rarely feels genuine remorse. They only regret the loss of comfort. Cameron did not leave me because I was cold. He left me because my sheer competence was a daily, suffocating reminder of his own inadequacy. He relied entirely on my intellect to survive, yet he resented me for it. My presence highlighted the fact that his entire identity was a rented facade. He chose Chelsea because her reliance on him allowed him to play the role of a self-made titan, effectively renting his fragile ego with the money I helped him secure. "That won't be necessary," I interrupted him, my voice entirely devoid of inflection. "The settlement papers are already signed. They're inside the safe in your home office." Cameron fell silent again. The silence lasted much longer this time. I shifted my gaze from the cold numbers and arrows on the glass wall and looked out the window. Outside, the gray skyline of the Boston Harbor stretched out to the horizon, the glass facades of the surrounding skyscrapers reflecting a dull, leaden light. We had lived in this ultra-luxury high-rise for the entirety of our marriage. Yet I had rarely ever taken the time to simply stand here and appreciate the view. I had poured the best 5 years of my professional youth into Cameron and his bankrupt biotech startup, Next Gen Innovations. I held a master's degree in financial risk management and went straight into a Big Four accounting firm right out of grad school, working myself to the bone to become a senior manager. I met Cameron when he was drowning in debt with his new venture. I used my specialized background to completely rebuild his financial models, untangle his chaotic accounting ledgers, and pull all-nighters writing his business plans. I sat by his side through endless venture capital pitch meetings, drinking myself sick with potential corporate partners, just to secure his $10 million Series A funding round. Later, when the company teetered on the brink of insolvency multiple times, I leveraged my professional network and my personal savings. I even went so far as to quietly take out a home equity line of credit on the small suburban house my late parents left me to plug his fatal cash flow deficits. I thought we were comrades in arms, equal partners who guarded each other's backs in the corporate trenches. I never imagined that in his eyes I was merely a sterile corporate machine that refused to warm up. He viewed my late nights analyzing risk spreadsheets and audit data as a personal failing rather than the very labor that kept a roof over his head. And then there was Chelsea, my former college roommate, my supposed best friend. We had shared a cramped dorm room, complained about unreasonable bosses, and navigated our early 20s together. I had leveraged my internal contacts to get her a respectable position as a lifestyle brand manager. She and Cameron had met at a dinner party I hosted. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, funding their lives while they conspired behind my back. Now I realized my loyalty had been a subscription, with me footing the bill. The intricate web of financial transfers on my whiteboard seemed to shimmer before my eyes. I had audited every single cent of his fraudulent existence. He had systematically embezzled $1.5 million to fund secret, extravagant getaways with Chelsea to a secluded luxury ryokan in Atami, Japan. This was the liquidated equity of my late parents' estate, and I was going to retrieve every last dime. The next afternoon, right on schedule, Cameron arrived at my penthouse, accompanied by his corporate defense attorney, Marcus. Cameron was wearing a brand new tailored suit, his face exuding confidence mixed with a trace of underlying defensive caution. Inside my penthouse, every single item belonging to Cameron had been securely packed, and neatly stacked by the front entrance. The towering stack of heavy cardboard boxes looked like a miniature graveyard of our marriage. When Cameron pushed the door open, his brow furrowed deeply. I sat calmly on the living room sofa, a thin stack of legal documents spread across the glass coffee table. I simply raised my chin toward the empty armchairs opposite me. Marcus pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and sat down first, adopting a strictly professional posture. I slid the top document across the glass table toward Cameron. Marcus picked up the packet and began scanning the pages with rapid precision. After reading just 3 pages, the lawyer's expression shifted dramatically. He looked up at me with a gaze filled with professional shock. "It appears there are several critical discrepancies," Marcus began, his voice intentionally level. "Mr. Cameron's equity in Next-Gen Innovations is a marital asset. Counselor Marcus," I cut him off smoothly, pulling a much thicker, professionally bound forensic accounting binder from beside my laptop and placing it directly in front of him. "This contains certified copies of all core financial ledgers for Next-Gen Innovations, complete bank wire transaction histories, and the formal investment subscription agreements. The capital injected during the firm's darkest crises came entirely from my personal funds." I paused, watching attorney Marcus's eyes widen in genuine shock as Cameron's face darkened with sudden apprehension. "According to our prenuptial addendum, all equity acquired via independent personal capital injection remains my exclusive non-divisible personal property, including 100% of its subsequent market appreciation. Furthermore, I am willing to assign my remaining 15% equity stake to Cameron at a $30 million valuation discount." Marcus's hands were trembling slightly as he flipped through the lethal cache of evidentiary documentation. Cameron's face went from angry red to a sickly ash gray. "You set me up," he hissed, slamming his fist onto the glass coffee table. "You failed to give me children. You spent 24 hours a day obsessing over corporate risk. Your hormone balance was entirely wrecked. That was your own personal failure." I actually felt the urge to laugh. "Cameron, we consulted top specialists. Both of our physiological panels were entirely normal. Explain to me how Chelsea magically managed to hit the biological jackpot with fraternal twins on her very first try. She lives on extreme crash diets and her lifestyle habits are far more chaotic than mine." My words struck like poison needles, piercing straight through his fragile facade. He snatched the pen out of Marcus's hand and violently slashed his signature across the bottom of the property division agreement. The heavy tip of the pen actually tore through the thick parchment paper. He stormed out with his boxes, leaving the penthouse completely silent. Exactly 2 months after our divorce decree was formally finalized, I spotted Cameron's latest public post while browsing Instagram from a burner account. It was a carousel of professional photographs accompanied by a nauseatingly sentimental caption. In the photos, Chelsea was dressed in plush designer loungewear, cradling the 2 infants in her arms. Cameron stood behind her, his face radiating an unmistakable glow of arrogant pride. The comment section had erupted into a massive virtual celebration among our professional circles, praising them for hitting the ultimate biological jackpot. I scrolled calmly through the endless stream of congratulations, closed the app, and booted up my encrypted laptop. I logged into a secure server. A new message was waiting in my inbox. Attached was a single, encrypted zip file. I extracted the contents. Inside were high-resolution photographs showing Trevor and Chelsea entering a private boutique fertility clinic together on 7 distinct occasions. Alongside the photos were copies of massive credit card transactions from Chelsea's secret accounts paying for specialized IVF treatments, and a recovered text thread where she explicitly coordinated the donor appointments with him. Chelsea had staged an elaborate biological fraud. I packed my bags and drove to Newport, Rhode Island, checking into a top-floor corner suite overlooking the generations-old waterfront compound where the grand legacy naming ceremony was taking place. Knowing the environment I was operating in was crucial. To Patricia, Cameron's old-money New England mother, the family name and genetic lineage were a religion. Chelsea's attempt to contaminate the bloodline with the family's most pathetic degenerate wasn't just infidelity, it was an act of absolute treason against the dynasty. Generational wealth demands genetic purity, and Patricia would act as the ultimate weapon of destruction to protect it. I forwarded the complete forensic dossier to Aunt Cynthia, the City Hall Records Director and former acquaintance of Patricia. I included one simple instruction. Please ensure Patricia reviews these documents in private before the ceremony begins. The most effective demolitions occur when the property owner willingly detonates the charges from inside the building. The following afternoon, under the sprawling cream-colored tents of the Newport compound, elite guests sipped champagne as Cameron delivered an arrogant, soaring speech praising Chelsea and declaring the family legacy secure. I sat comfortably in the back of my parked town car just outside the compound gates, watching a crystal-clear live video feed from a secondary smartphone Aunt Cynthia had discreetly hidden near the VIP pavilion. Cameron cradled his son, his face illuminated by an expression of supreme arrogance. Today I can finally stand before you and say the family legacy is secure. His amplified voice echoed across the manicured lawns. Right at that exact second, Patricia stood up, her hands trembling as she clutched the forensic dossier Aunt Cynthia had privately insured. She read. Her movement was so violent and abrupt that her heavy mahogany dining chair scraped backward across the brick patio with a sharp screech. She strode onto the stage with a look of icy, terrifying desolation, bypassing the babies entirely to glare directly at Chelsea. Into the podium microphone, Patricia screamed the ultimate question, her voice slicing through the air like a razor blade. Whose bastard seed is this child? She snatched a thick brown manila envelope and hurled the forensic dossier across the stage. The heavy parchment papers and glossy photographs rained down across the front row dining tables, exposing Chelsea's medical fraud and Trevor's donor profile to 300 elite guests. As absolute chaos engulfed the estate and Cameron's father collapsed onto the patio, I stepped through the front gates. I was wearing a tailored black business suit and oversized sunglasses. The entire lawn went dead silent as hundreds of heads swiveled in my direction. I walked up the center aisle, my heels clicking steadily against the brick, and stepped onto the stage. Well, Cameron, I said smoothly into the microphone. Since you've gathered the entire elite here today to celebrate your massive success, I decided to conduct a real-time public audit of your financial books. I placed my own legal binder on the table. Next-Gen Innovation's core enterprise contracts were forged. You ran an illegal Ponzi scheme. Cameron lunged toward the microphone, his face the color of wet ash, but before he could even speak, I smiled coldly. I forwarded the complete forensic audit to the SEC and the IRS at 8:00 a.m. this morning. Right on cue, his smartphone began to vibrate frantically. He inadvertently answered on speakerphone. His assistant's hysterical voice exploded across the estate, screaming that all corporate operating accounts had just been permanently frozen for commercial bank fraud. And one final administrative detail, I added, my voice cutting cleanly through the wailing infants and the ensuing chaos. The emergency capital I injected last year wasn't a gift. It was a strict corporate loan secured by the company's intellectual property. When you rushed to sign that divorce settlement without your lawyer properly auditing it, you legally assumed those debt obligations. By liquidating the marital assets, you triggered an immediate technical default. The core biotech patents have legally reverted to my private holding company. You don't even own your own product. You own an empty shell company carrying $20 million in toxic debt. Cameron stood completely paralyzed in the ruins of his own arrogance. Days later, Chelsea's true survivalist nature surfaced with breathtaking speed. She systematically liquidated Cameron's personal emergency savings and cleared out his private safe deposit box. She vanished into the wind, taking Trevor and over $2 million in untraceable family heirloom jewelry and untethered trust funds with her. When wild dogs are starved of their meat, they inevitably turn around and tear each other to shreds. Cameron was left living in a cheap, 2-star motel near the airport. He finally called my personal cell phone using a prepaid burner device, weeping uncontrollably into the receiver. Chelsea took everything, he sobbed, his voice stripped of all its former arrogant swagger. My company is gone. The children aren't mine. I have absolutely nothing left in this world. Savannah, please let me come back to you. I'm begging you." Listening to his pathetic pleas, I felt an overwhelming sense of sheer boredom. He didn't regret betraying me. He only regretted losing the one hyper-competent safety net that kept his fraudulent life afloat. "Cameron," I said smoothly, my voice completely level, "you have made a critical error in your risk assessment model. I am not your contingency plan. I am not your bridge loan, and I will never be your life raft again. Your ruin is simply the mathematical balance of your own account." I hung up and permanently blocked the number. I have come to realize that true power and security never come from maintaining toxic relationships, clinging to societal validation, or screaming for vengeance. The truth is, extreme loyalty is frequently rewarded with extreme exploitation. By attempting to be the perfect supportive partner, I had inadvertently enabled his delusion. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes, it's the only way to set yourself free. But setting yourself free requires radical self-reliance. It requires the quiet, unshakable courage to treat toxic relationships as failed investments, to surgically liquidate your ties without emotion, and the immense discipline to step back and let abusers destroy themselves under the heavy weight of their own deceit. I walked out onto my private terrace, raising a glass of crisp wine toward the glittering Boston skyline. The evening air was cool against my skin. For the very first time in my adult life, I was fully liberated, unapologetically autonomous, and completely ready to conquer my global future. Drop a comment below and share if you have ever felt like the invisible one in your own family or walked away from a toxic relationship. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories on justice and self-reliance.